Mike Feuz, welcome back.
Logan Albright.
How's it going today?
Number 4. It's going good.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
Excellent.
Always good to be in the Free the People studio.
Yeah.
Also because I just feel cool being here.
Yeah. You know, I tell you, it's been so nice out these last few weeks that like I'm in the fall mood, and I know it's only August, but it feels like fall to me, and so I'm a super into autumn is my favorite season. Halloween is my favorite holiday. I'm really into it, and I'm already starting to think like, how am I going to celebrate Halloween this year? Because nobody's going to do anything fun. Like there won't be any parties. There's not going to be any like kids trick or treating and stuff. It's going to be awful.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out like what to do this year, and I decided I'm just going to order lots of scary movies on DVD.
Kind of want to celebrate Halloween with you. I don't know if I've ever had
I'm totally
Logan
down.
Albright Halloween.
I'll come to your place. You can come to my place. Whatever you want to do, and we'll watch some movies or something. Because I love scary movies. So I've just decided to go on Amazon and buy a ton of scary movies on DVD and have a little marathon for myself because I love Halloween so much. And it turns out horror movies are really cheap. Like you can get Blu-rays for $5. Nobody wants them apparently.
It's just like the Walmart $5 bin.
No, like on Amazon.
On Amazon,
for $5. Yeah, I was really surprised.
Oh, there was a scary movie I just saw a review on the other day from like the 90s or the early 2000s, and I meant to ask you about. I'll think of it. It's about kind of a true story, but Hollywoodized about an American cannibal, and I was like, no, I can't watch this. But you're usually
love a good cannibal movie.
Yeah.
Those are the best.
But you know what? The one thing I think it's from Family Guy. He always does a little clip it, which grinds my gears.
Yeah,
grinds my gears about the
grinds
fall.
your gears?
Pumpkin beer. I hate pumpkin beer.
I like it.
It's over. It's just everywhere. I used to, when I was like 21, I'd be like, oh, this is so cool. Now I can't.
I bet you're one of those anti-pumpkin spice latte guys too.
I don't order them. I like pumpkin bread. I like all the other pumpkin stuff. I just hate pumpkin beer.
I like it. I always look forward to it every year when it comes out.
I haven't drank in years, but I'm going to stick with it.
All right.
I don't want it.
Fine. Well, we don't have pumpkin beer today.
Don't bring it over to my house.
This is a flask this is the original Free the People flask that we were given when we started working here. And I think it's still got the original whiskey in it that was loaded up. And I believe it's Angel's Envy aged in port casks like we had last week. So cheers.
Cheers. Terry, isn't that Terry's favorite?
That's Terry's
Angel's
favorite bourbon.
Envy?
It was her gateway bourbon, Angel's Envy.
When you guys were
Although
out,
other brands are available.
when you guys were out filming the Massey documentary a couple years ago, did you stop by like Louisville and do any?
No, we really. Oh, where did we go? We went to Buffalo Trace.
Oh, you did.
That's where we did. Yeah, I still have a bottle of their like high proof White Lightning stuff.
Yeah,
it's really good, but it's like you can't drink much of it.
I can never find just Buffalo Trace in the ABC stores in Virginia. I can find the one that like the Eagle Rare or something. I think they make maybe,
Right.
but
I actually like regular Buffalo Trace better than Eagle Rare.
yeah, I do
even though
too. That's
Eagle
why I'm
Rare
always
is higher
looking
end.
for it,
Yeah.
but I can never find just Buffalo Trace.
I think they have it at my new Safeway that has a great liquor store.
Well, Washington is apparently freer on liquor than Virginia.
Yeah, they're not owned by the government, which is nice.
Darn it.
Well, speaking of serial killers and horror movies and cannibals and stuff, there's a new Kibbe on Liberty coming out this week with a woman named Hannah Cox. She's not a serial killer. I don't want anyone to misconstrue.
Nice lady.
I'm getting to the point. She's with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. And I thought we could talk a little bit about the death penalty and our views on it today because it's a controversial subject and we both have strong opinions about it. And so I thought that would be fun.
Yeah. You want to kick it off with
Sure.
yours?
Well, as our resident Catholic, I thought you would probably have some really interesting views on this, but I'll go ahead and start. I used to be much more pro-death penalty than I am now. And the reason was because there are some people who just do terrible, terrible things. And I think that those people I don't really have a lot of sympathy for them. I think those people who do awful things to children, to women, to things like that, I don't care if they get killed. I think it's okay. They deserve to die. Doesn't bother me. And all the arguments that were presented against the death penalty to me were things like, well, we should be merciful to them. They could be redeemed. They could be rehabilitated. We might execute the wrong guy. You shouldn't punish someone with a permanent punishment if you can't take it back. And I was never persuaded by any of these arguments. I thought they were all weak arguments. They didn't hold anything with me. And I finally changed my mind on the death penalty from something that Jordan Peterson said. I saw a video of him talking about it. And he basically admitted the thing I couldn't get anyone else to admit while also being against the death penalty. He said there are unquestionably people who deserve to die. They do terrible things and they deserve to die. But the question is not whether they deserve to die. The question is whether you want to give the state the power to decide who lives and dies, if you want to give the state the power to kill someone. And that really stuck with me because I'm very skeptical of state power and I'm very worried about the abuse of power. And when you give someone a monopoly on force, on violence, when you give someone the monopoly on the ability to kill people legitimately, that could be so easily be abused and so easily be used for the wrong purposes. And we've seen it throughout history in all these different, totalitarian societies. That really swung me over. And now I think the death penalty is a bad idea. I don't think we should do it. I do think there's people who deserve to die. But I'm also a huge J.R.R. Tolkien fan. And a quote from The Lord of the Rings is when Frodo is saying that Bilbo should have killed Gollum when he had the chance because he deserves to die. Gandalf says he does deserve to die, but a lot of people who live deserve to die, and a lot of people who die deserve to live. You can't give it to them, so you shouldn't be so quick to deal out death and judgment, which I think is a great quote. Tolkien is a hero of mine, and he has a lot of beautiful quasi-libertarian quotes that I think are excellent.
He's also Catholic.
He's also a Catholic.
Gotta get a shout out there.
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of where I am on the death penalty these days.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of similar. I started out, I have kind of two sides to my death, being against the death penalty. I'm pretty strongly against it now.
Yeah.
There's my Catholicism, which is kind of how I order my life. And then there's obviously someone who does not subscribe to my Catholicism. I can present it as why I believe in it, but it isn't a good argument that can convince them if they're looking for me to present an argument to try to convince them. So I have another kind of similar theory to you. But I started out with, I think in my young undergrad, ordering my life more to my political beliefs, and I was kind of the strong neocon Republican, law and order, death penalty, and so I was very for it. But religion was kind of instilled in me, my Catholicism, and as I got older, it kind of continued to grow in me, and so that first shifted me away from the death penalty. Catholics believe life is sacred from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, and that's just cut and dry for me now. But outside of that, if I'm talking to someone who doesn't subscribe to my Catholicism and what the beliefs that I hold and cherish there and how I order my life, it's kind of similar to you. My libertarianism now, or classical liberalism, I don't trust the government with the power to take life or death, or to be the arbiter of life and death. So yes, there's facts where I rather have 100. First of all, they're bound to make mistakes, so that was a weak argument. But I'd rather have 100 guilty men live than one innocent man die by accident, and also get those 100 guilty men. So for me, I just don't think it's proper to decide who lives and dies. I don't think anyone should possess that power. I'll say I leave like 0.0000001% open for the death penalty in my philosophy. I don't think in America it should be legal. I think we have the resources to take the worst people in society and still respect their dignity as human beings and put them away. But in countries where they don't have the infrastructure, third world countries where putting someone in prison that's done something so heinous and their actual life, this might be controversial, so I'll see who yells at me on YouTube, where their life would be more miserable left alive, where they'll just be tortured and brutalized in prison day after day, I am open to considering that might be more humane to actually put that person to death. In America, I don't think that's an issue we face anymore.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I'll go into a little bit why some of the arguments were not convincing to me initially. First of all, we might execute the wrong person. I never found that persuasive, because if you're going to have a justice system, I always found I'd rather one innocent man go free than 100 guilty men be punished. I never found that particularly persuasive, because if you're going to have any kind of justice system where you punish people for crimes, you're going to make mistakes. And any punishment you deal out can't be taken back. People say you can't take the death penalty back. You can't take taking 20 years of someone's life back if you put them in jail. You can't take corporal punishment back. If you hit someone or inflict pain, that pain is always going to be with them. Anything you do, you can't undo. So I never really found that. It's just a difference of degree.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah. And yeah, you're always going to make mistakes. You're never 100% sure whether someone is guilty or not. There's always going to be mistakes there. So it's inevitable that you're going to punish guilty people. And the question is, do you punish anyone? If you're so unwilling to punish people who might be innocent, you shouldn't punish anyone ever. But can you run a society like that? That's a difficult question. But ultimately it has to do more with the person doing the killing than it does the person being killed. And also, I think, if you have an execution, someone has to carry out that execution. Someone has to pull the trigger. Someone has to inject the needle. Someone has to flip the switch. And what does that do to that person who has to then know that they've taken someone's life? That's not healthy for them. I don't want to put anyone in that position.
And now, to the first point there, I know one of your favorite presidents is Grover Cleveland, and he actually He was either mayor or sheriff of Buffalo, and he oversaw 2 public executions where he actually pulled the lever.
Yeah.
Was he against the death penalty and felt like he should be the one that has to pull the lever, or did he just feel like if someone has to be, it's my responsibility to?
I don't know his views on the death penalty. I like Grover Cleveland because he was sort of one of the last classical liberal presidents we had. He was very against federal government intervention in the economy. He was a strong believer in the Constitution. He would always refer to the Constitution before signing any legislation to see if it fit and was constitutional. So I really like him for that, and he seemed like just an honest guy. He was a stand-up guy. He ended up being a father to someone who may have not been his kid. We were not sure. Like he may have fathered someone out of wedlock, or maybe someone else's kid. And he wasn't sure, but he fathered him anyway and brought him up as their own child, which is nice. So I like Grover Cleveland, but I don't know his position.
Yeah, and then penalty. To go back to what you first said about the weakness of the argument of like one innocent man, where that one innocent man lived and 100 guilty men die, or however you word it. It certainly is that slippery slope because you can't take back anything. I think maybe, well, actually, kind of how I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but kind of my counterpoint is probably a nice follow-up to that is the life is the most sacred thing. Like you can never get back 20 years or even a moment of pain inflicted upon you, but you still have something left.
Yes.
A life where the life is literally the complete extinguishment of that human being, that soul.
But don't you think as a Catholic that it's not the extinguishment of that soul?
Oh, it's true. The soul lives on, but the life is a gift from God as a Catholic. So, so true. Don't anybody that's Catholic. That was a slip of the tongue. Your theology's awful. But I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of. I feel like the life. Yeah, the life is. It's certainly a slippery slope. I agree with you there. But I feel like you could still argue. The life is the end all be all, where you can't get back that 20 years. We've seen that in the news plenty of times. Right. But at least have something left. Yeah,
that's a good point. And, we've been doing a lot of work on alternative justice reforms, like restorative justice practices as opposed to prison. And I generally think prison is not a very helpful thing for the most part. I think that and we don't have to get into that, but, people who go into prison and come out again tend to not do so well. But I think, the reason prisons have a good purpose is for people that you can't let out into society again. People who are so psychotic or so deranged or have done such evil things that we just can't let them be part of society. It's sort of the equivalent of exile, but there's nowhere to exile people to because everywhere is populated now. So you could just put them in prison for life. I think that's an appropriate function of prisons.
Yeah, and I lost track of a few of the other weak arguments that you mentioned that.
Oh, what were some of the other ones? I think it was people saying that you might be wrong. Well, we went over that one. You might be wrong about someone. I don't remember what else I said.
Why? Okay. Well, without going down that rabbit hole, why do you think... So traditionally, Republicans are pro-life, no abortion.
Right.
Which I certainly fit in that box, personally. But then we're pro-death penalty.
Yes.
And then you go to the other side of the aisle, it's the exact opposite.
Right.
Have you ever thought why are the Democrats so against the death penalty?
So that's sort of a gotcha thing that Democrats like to use on Republicans, which I think is a little silly because they say, "Oh, you're pro-life, but you're for the death penalty," as if there's an equivalency between a newborn infant or a fetus in the womb and a criminal who's murdered people or raped people. Like, there's a difference there. I think that it has to do with sort of a more right-wing law and order and consequentialism. Like, you should bear the consequences of your actions sort of viewpoint. So if you do something really bad, you should be punished for it, is the right-wing view. Babies haven't done anything bad yet, so we don't want to punish them by killing them. I think that's the way the right thinks about it in general. That's the way I used to think about it when I was more on the right than I am now. For the left, I genuinely don't know why they are so anti-death penalty. I want to be charitable and say that it's for the same reasons we've talked about, but I don't know if that's the case because they are certainly not. I mean, there's different types of people on the left.
Yeah,
right?
they don't collectively all fall into that.
Some of them are just think that an unborn child is not a person because of science, and they say it's a cluster of cells and it doesn't have any of it can't move on its own, its heart can't beat on its own, all these things, which I think is increasingly being not borne out by the scientific evidence as we learn more about the human development. But I think there's some people who honestly think about it from a scientific point of view. I think there's other people who just, want to have a licentious attitude towards sex. And they think, in order for women to be able to have that kind of licentious attitude, they need to be able to have birth control as often as possible, and including abortion as a form of birth control. So it depends on who you're talking to. And then why are they against the death penalty? I don't know. I think there's some, again, who are just, do it for humane reasons. But I don't really know. I think there's a difference in human nature, the view of human nature on the left and the right. The left tends to view human nature as much more malleable than the right, and the right tends to view it as much more fixed, which is why the left likes things like communism, which completely run counter to human nature. They say, oh, we can change human nature. The right doesn't think we can change human nature. So maybe they think that people who have done bad things can be rehabilitated and changed and to become good people, more so than the right thinks that, because they believe that the nature of what a person is can be twisted and molded more easily. That's just my theory.
No, yeah, I'm considering, like, maybe is it something that's always just been a given on the left, and so not a lot of thought has been continually put into it. I'm sure there's plenty of intellectuals on the left that, again, I don't want to generalize, but that would present a pretty strong argument. But I bet collectively it's probably on the same on the right with pro-death penalty. It's kind of been a given for so long now that we just kind of accept, yep, I'm on the right, I fall in that box, I fall on the left.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on, where people just accept the basket of policy positions that is with their side. We become so tribal as a society now that if you're on the right, you believe these things. If you're on the left, you believe these things. And there's a punishment for disobeying any of those. If you want to be on the left and you want to be pro-death penalty, they're going to punish you for that. So the incentive is not to be pro-death penalty. If you want to be on the right and you want to be anti-death penalty, they'll punish you for that. They'll say, oh, you love criminals and pedophiles. You just want them to run free and do whatever they want. So I think that a lot of people who don't want to invest the intellectual effort or who are worried about alienating their social circle just accept the whole entire basket of policy positions, the entire platform, without really thinking about each individual plank and saying, well, I agree with that, I don't agree with that. We really need to have a more a la carte approach to policy where people think, well, this makes sense to me, this doesn't make sense to me. And maybe they have an underlying philosophy that guides everything that they believe, but you shouldn't have to just accept the entire platform of either the left or the right, because some of them are right and some of them are wrong.
Yeah, I think life would be a lot more interesting in politics if that's the approach we took, too. We said it in the past. I enjoy a good, passionate dialogue, so if I don't have to accept everything a la carte, or accept everything, just here's your platter that you have to take, if
I mean, that's
I'd have a lot more fun.
We see that in presidential politics this year really strongly, because like the left is supporting Biden-Harris, and the left also apparently supports criminal justice reform, and those two things blatantly contradict, because Biden and Harris are terrible on criminal justice reform. But because they're tribal and they care more about the party than the ideology, that's what they support. And then on the right, the right used to be pro-free trade. And we said we think free trade is good for the economy and it's great. And then when Donald Trump got elected, suddenly everybody on the right was anti-free trade, because we're like, well, we support Trump and he's anti-free trade, so we have to adopt that position. And you don't. You can take a variety of positions and make up your own mind on these things.
It's been my biggest headbanging into the desk since the election of Donald Trump is the movement away from free trade and back to this almost mercantilism of pre-Adam Smith.
I think it's probably my least favorite thing about Trump is his ridiculous worldview that countries are winners and losers in trade, and either we win or we lose, and so we have to win the war of trade against other countries. And that's not how it works at all. It's when two people voluntarily engage in a trade, by definition, they both win, because otherwise they wouldn't voluntarily do it. You'd have to force them to if one of them was going to lose by it. But for some reason, he has this zero-sum game thing. Maybe it comes from the movie Wall Street, where Gordon Gekko talks about that. But that's not how economics works. There's not winners and losers. There's, everybody wins, or else they wouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Yeah, fixed pie.
Fixed pie.
That's what always has plagued both left and right economics in some manner. It's only so if I have $10, you don't have $10.
One of my big pet peeves is this kind of collectivization of language, where we talk about entities that aren't real things as if they're people, like countries. So we say, oh, we have to beat China, or we can't trade with China, or we have to be careful about Russia. Russia's bad. And it's like, Russia's not a thing. Russia's an arbitrary, abstract idea that's like lines drawn on a map and a certain political system. But and China's not a thing. China's just an idea. And what you're really talking about is people. And if you're saying we shouldn't trade with China, what you're meaning is, John Smith in America shouldn't trade with, I don't want to make up a Chinese name because it'll sound racist, someone in China. Yeah. Those are just individuals trading with each other the same way any other two individuals would trade with each other. The fact that they're located in different countries doesn't matter. They're still benefiting from trade the same way that two Americans benefiting from trade would.
But government should be able to tell you who you can't. I'm just kidding. That's how the
same thing with war. We should go to war with Iran. Well,
yeah.
Iran's not a thing. What you're saying is American people should go and shoot at Iranian people. That's what bothers me, and I wish we could kind of fix that language problem, but it's such a convenient thing for communicating that it's hard to really tear it down and rethink it, because it's just the way we've always talked.
Yeah. It's a given almost, but yeah. But, so you've also been, what else has been going on with you?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about this book I've been reading, because it's sort of, I've been hearing a lot about it lately, and it's on the New York Times bestseller list, and I decided to pick it up and read it. It's called A Gentleman in Moscow by Amour Towles, which I think means love of towels in French. And it's about this guy in the 1920s and 30s who is a former Russian aristocrat who gets sentenced after the revolution to live the rest of his life in a hotel where he's been living. They said, if you leave the hotel, we'll shoot you, because they don't like aristocrats. They got to level everybody out under communism. And it's a really interesting book. It's surprising to me that it's so popular, because not much happens in it. It's basically the guy just living his life in a hotel. It doesn't really have much of a plot, but it's really interesting. And it's not a political book either. It's not about how bad communism is, but it takes place in the Soviet Union. And so it's kind of unavoidable to kind of see how bad communism is. And I find that interesting from a non-political point of view, where he's just, you see all the little things that communism does that's harmful to people. It's an economy based not on value created, but on favors and snitching, basically. If you can get friends in high places, if you can tell on one of your neighbors that they're not doing the right thing, you can get advanced in the society, and how poisonous that is. And I worry about that, like with the coronavirus and everything. People are encouraged to snitch on their neighbors and say, he's not wearing a mask. And that's really scary. And then there's all this kind of trying to level out class distinctions. One of the most heartbreaking moments in the novel for me is there's the scene in a wine cellar where the hotel has a wine cellar that's thousands of bottles deep of the best, finest wine. And the Communist Party says, well, your wine list is classist because it's got different vintages from different vineyards, from different countries, and they're different prices and they're different qualities. So we're going to peel off all the labels of all the wine, and everyone's going to drink either red wine or white wine, and that's it. And this is like not an exaggeration of what actually happened in the Soviet Union, but it's just so depressing about how everything has to be level and everything has to be the same, and there's no individuality and there's no humanity. And so although the point of the book is not to condemn communism, it's just telling a story, that backdrop is really interesting to me.
That wine story, that kind of really just resonated with me. That's almost, that's tragic.
Pretty bad, huh?
There's no even individualism with a bottle of wine. Like, where did this come from? Who made it? What's so unique about half the great part about ordering a bottle of wine is the story behind the bottle.
Yeah.
So you can sit there and discuss it and like, oh, this came from this region of the world and this is who made it. And it's been aged for this many years. Like, that's half the novelty of a bottle of wine.
Yeah, it's like, and different wines go with different foods. The main character, the Count, is very upset because he wants to order an Italian wine with an Italian food. He wants to order French wine with French food. Can't do it because it's all the same, all the same grape variety, all the same year. It doesn't matter. Obviously the wines are different, but you can't tell by looking at the bottle what it is.
I have a book at home that's a coffee table book, but I bought it because it's a coffee table book of photos of just Russian bus stops, which is kind of weird. But the cool story about Russian bus stops was in the Soviet Union, they regulated everything, how every building should be constructed. Everything had to look the same, kind of like your wine cellar story.
Yeah.
But they forgot to regulate bus stops. So the bus stops in the Soviet Union were works of art. It's where artists flock to build these, and architects, these elaborate bus stops with different angles, and there's different murals and paintings, and they're kind of beautiful.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
I bought it because I was like, wow, that really kind of shows how humans are drawn to a creativity. We're entrepreneurial in spirit, and when you limit everything, it's kind of, they found the one little
people will innovate around regulations. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Well, this book really appeals to me because I studied Russian in college. So I studied the Russian language, Russian history, Russian cinema, Russian literature, all these things, and so Russian music. So there's all this references to things that I studied in college and found really interesting. So that really is resonating with me, and I find that interesting. And then on the other hand, I studied economics in grad school. So all the economic failures of the Soviet Union. He talks a little bit about the kind of forced redistribution of the agricultural labor when he's trying to urbanize and make everything less agricultural and more urban, and how it resulted in horrible famines in the Ukraine, and everybody died and it got swept under the rug and everything. I think that's addressed in a footnote in this book, but it is talked about a little bit. But so those two different interests for me, the Russian culture interest and the economics interest, really collide in this book in a way that makes it a lot of fun to read.
When you're reading this book, do you kind of get the idea or does it do a good job of capturing, I guess, my opinion of, and correct me if you disagree, that Russia and the Soviet Union and communism fundamentally were incorrect on how they viewed the human person. The fancy word is anthropology, but I don't think, I just say.
Yeah, no, I think that it's clear how dehumanizing it is, like how there's the echoes, the kind of romantic echoes of Tsarist Russia. Not that Tsarist Russia was any good. I don't want to praise the Tsarist system or the serfdom or anything like that, but they had, more individuality, and like they have these beautiful architecture and these great hotels and all this good food and all this good culture, and it all kind of just dies with the revolution, because suddenly all the architecture is the same, all the food is the same. They can't get exotic spices anymore. They're not making great art anymore. And it's just, it's depressing. It's sad to see all that kind of fade away. And I think it's a total misunderstanding of human nature, like we were talking about earlier.
Probably the good kind of anarchy is what they killed.
Exactly. That spontaneous order is the word we would use. Yeah.
Where people just figure out the good stuff and then something emerges and you're like, wow, it was pretty awesome. Didn't even imagine that.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool. My wife and I, we actually have a copy of this book. I like to read. We read books together. That's one that we bought, and I actually have not read it yet. But I'll go do the same thing.
Yeah, I recommend it. You should check it out, and we'll talk about what you think of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to dive into it just so I can keep up with you a little bit.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
See you. Cheers.